Sekhmet, while primarily the goddess of pestilence in ancient Egyptian mythology, was a rather general figure, so this allows for a bit of latitude when it comes to her characterization, and which is something that will be a bit significant later on. However, uh, more importantly, Sekhmet is a very ancient Egyptian deity. She's been around for a while in the ancient Egyptian mythos. Her name comes from the Egyptian word Sekhem, which means power or might. So her name can literally be translated as the she who is mighty or the powerful one. She was often depicted as a lioness, and this actually led to her later being absorbed into the characteristics of the goddess Maut, the uh, mother deity of Thebes, when Thebes became the regional power in Egypt. Uh, Sekhmet was often associated with Bast, the goddess of cats. They were seen as a huge example of duality in Egyptian culture, since Sekhmet was often associated with destruction, while Bastet was often seen as a protector. But both of them share the title of the Eye of Ra, which is a title of Ra's divine sort of enforcer, the enforcer of the will of the pharaoh of the gods. It's, uh, so Sekhmet, as I said, was associated not just with pestilence, but destruction as a whole. So as a result, the Egyptians had a few different titles for her: Lady of Terror, Lady of Pestilence. She was also called the Red Lady due to her associations with the sun and the desert. There's a superstition that the hot desert winds in Egypt were actually her breath. But the reason that pestilence, I think, is a more appropriate focal point for her characterization is because of two specific titles, Lady of Life and Lady of Healing. Because Sekhmet, while she often brought pestilence, she could just as easily take it away. She could alleviate disease and cure certain ailments. And so, because of this, she was actually the patron deity of physicians, and her priests were actually skilled, proficient healers in ancient Egypt. So, because of this, pestilence is really the best idea to really be seen as the face of her character, if you will. But as I said earlier, she was also the original Eye of Ra. She was Ra's first divine enforcer, and this is a significant part of the really only myth that's centered around Sekhmet herself. So early on in creation, soon after humanity was born, Ra observed that humanity was becoming a bit arrogant, somewhat insolent. They were not properly respecting Ra and the divine order. So Ra decided to send Sekhmet to punish humanity until they learned to show the proper deference. So as a result, Sekhmet descended upon ancient Egypt and began carving a bloody swath of destruction. Some versions of the myth actually say this is how Egypt became a desert in the first place. Sekhmet was simply causing that much destruction. And so when Ra saw this, he began to regret his decision, but he knew that Sekhmet was so incredibly bloodthirsty that she would not be able to be stopped easily. So Ra provided humanity with some more oblique tools to stop her. He had 7,000 jugs of beer poured out into the open desert and mixed with pomegranate juice in order to make it resemble blood. So Sekhmet immediately pounced on this and consumed so much of the mixture that she became drunk and fell unconscious for 3 days. Now, the result of this is also significant in that supposedly this is a source of her connection with the god Hathor, the goddess of joy, festivity, music, dance, and sometimes female sexuality. And the significance of this is that Sekhmet and Hathor were seen as two split personalities of the same goddess, and so Sekhmet, being outwitted and essentially drugged by humanity, resulted in her transforming into Hathor. Now, the point of contention here is really which personality came first. Some stories will say that Hathor actually was the original personality, and that Sekhmet was purposefully awoken within her by Ra as a vengeful personality of divine retribution to punish humanity. However, some other stories will say Sekhmet always existed as Ra's divine enforcer from the beginning, and that Hathor did not exist before Sekhmet's sedation. Some versions of the myth also say that after Sekhmet woke up, instead of immediately transforming into Hathor, uh, she immediately spotted Ptah, who I've mentioned earlier as a god of craftsmen and was believed by the Thebans to actually be the god of creation in general, cosmic creation. But regardless, some versions of the myth say that Ptah was the first figure Sekhmet spotted upon awakening, and that she immediately fell in love with him. And their son was Nefertum, the god of flowers and aromas, but who was also often associated with healing. And so, as Sekhmet and Ptah, their union was essentially the union of destruction and creation, respectively. This was seen as an ultimate reestablishment of balance, of duality, which again, a very prevalent theme in Egyptian culture, and probably something I should actually dedicate a whole video to later on, because it's a very interesting topic. But I digress. Sekhmet was also sometimes depicted as the mother of another god, Mahes, another Leonin god associated with the sun and with warfare and sometimes the desert. Though sometimes, since Nefertum occasionally also transformed into a lion, then it was sometimes hypothesized that Nefertum and Mahes were actually, again, two split personalities of the same deity. Though Sekhmet's association with lions has actually created some conflict regarding exactly what her origins are. So she's sometimes depicted as holding a staff made of papyrus, which is supposed to be a symbol of Lower Egypt. And well, before I proceed any farther, I have to make a bit of explain this a bit for people who might not be too familiar with the geography of ancient Egypt. So Lower Egypt was actually in the north, because the northern segment of Egypt actually had a lower average altitude than southern Egypt. So yes, Lower Egypt is in the north, and Upper Egypt is in the south. Bit confusing, but there it is. And so Sekhmet was sometimes associated with Lower Egypt because of her being attached to the symbol, but some have actually said that it would make more sense for her to have been introduced from somewhere farther south of Egypt, maybe around Sudan, somewhere where lions would be in greater abundance than they would be around Egypt. And this theory is supported a bit by Bast sometimes being paired with Sekhmet, again, as two feline goddesses who have enforced Ra's will. They've often been associated with, when people split Egypt in half, they'll often associate Bast with one half and Sekhmet with the other, and Sekhmet was more often associated with Upper Egypt, and Bast was seen as representing Lower Egypt. But, so that's Sekhmet, a very interesting example of the ideas of duality and balance in Egyptian myth, and it's a very intriguing goddess. But I hope that this video has been a bit helpful. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.